Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Michael Weiss, CEO of Nasdaq-listed TG Therapeutics, to discuss the development and commercialization of novel treatments for B-cell malignancies and autoimmune diseases. Michael, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks for having me.
And explain to the audience in more detail where TG Therapeutics fits in the biotech ecosystem.
Sure. So we're a therapeutics company. So we have drugs focused on B-cell diseases, cancers such as chronic lymphocytic leukemia, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but also B-cell diseases are implicated in autoimmune diseases as well. So things like multiple sclerosis is a main target for ours, but also things like RA, lupus could also come into focus.
How has the company spearheaded growth for its shareholders?
So we've been driving growth through our clinical development program. So we have a very robust program to build out into the diseases that we're focused in. So this past year alone, we delivered phase 3 data for 4 diseases: marginal zone lymphoma, follicular lymphoma, chronic lymphocytic leukemia, and multiple sclerosis. So all positive pivotal data sets all delivered in 2020. And our first approval came in 21 for marginal zone lymphoma and follicular lymphoma. And then we're looking for approvals later this year in CLL, and then sometime probably in the middle of next year for multiple sclerosis. So it's all being driven right now by our clinical development engine, and that's going to lead us to commercial. We do have our first drug approved, and so the commercial is starting, but it's really, so far to date, it's really been driven off of our successful clinical development programs.
That's quite encouraging to get, 4 pieces of good news on such complex diseases. So when we think about 2021, when we think about 2022, will these treatments become commercialized or put into treatment?
Yeah, so that is the goal. So as I mentioned, marginal zone lymphoma and follicular lymphoma in late stages are now approved for our first drug called UKONIQ. Generic name is umbralisib for those who've been following the company, but it's now called UKONIQ commercially. And then in the later this year, we're looking at a potential approval for chronic lymphocytic leukemia for UKONIQ plus our other drug, ublituximab, which is an anti-CD20 monoclonal antibody. So we use them together as one a combination, and so we'll be filing for that. So yeah, so hopefully that'll be commercially available later this year for patients with chronic lymphocytic leukemia, and that'll be for ideally, that's the goal, is for patients with all types of CLL. So you could be a frontline naive patient never treated before, or you could be someone who's been previously treated with 1 or more therapies. You should be eligible if we get the approval that we're hoping for this new U2 treatment, which again, late last year, we showed data that it was better, significantly better than chemoimmunotherapy, which is one of the standards of care. So that's hopefully going to drive our commercial platform and on the oncology side. And then into next year, multiple sclerosis, that other drug, ublituximab, which I mentioned was going to be in that U2 combination, we pulled it apart and we separately have treated patients with MS. We actually just this past weekend announced the positive final data, which was previously pre-announced in December. So that filing for FDA approval will hopefully be completed sometime in the 3rd quarter for an approval around middle of next year. Again, that will then launch us into our neuroimmunology franchise, which we plan on building as well.
So, Michael, for the layperson here, when we talk about oncology and cancer treatment, most of us are well aware of the fact that chemotherapy is just brutal. Will this new treatment be more effective? Will it improve quality of life? Not be so quite as intense for patients? What's the end game?
Yeah, so all the above, actually. Yeah, so we're using 2 agents, and let's talk about CLL for the moment. So we're using 2 agents. One is a pill. So it's a generally it's not a chemotherapy, it's a targeted agent. So it does have toxicities, but they're not chemotherapy-like toxicities, typically very different. And then the CD20, which is a product that's infused. There's been CD20s that have been around for a while, and they're very well tolerated. So yeah, the combination is ideally going to provide, we have the data to support that it improves progression-free survival, which is basically a measure of how long people live without the disease. So that was part of the trial. I believe we also showed that the tolerability profile was quite good and different for sure from chemotherapy. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to improve patients' lives by making them live longer, healthier lives. That's our goal. And you too, one thing that the company's always been focused on, and we always try to emphasize it, is you too is the starting point for us. It's not the end game. The company was founded on the idea that we were going to take multiple drugs and put them together into a package. And ideally, each time you add a new drug, you don't make it so intolerable, but also expand that life expectancy. So you too, while we're very excited about it and we think it has a real potential utility in a number of unmet medical needs in CLL today, once we layer in the next drug and the next drug, we think, again, every step of the way, we're trying to improve patient outcomes and longevity, ideally.
Well, amazing work. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks, Jill.